The footage hit Jeremiah Cade at 2:47 a.m., his new nanny kneeling beside his paralyzed triplets, whispering something she didn't want anyone to hear. Then Rowan's toes curled. Deliberately. Impossible. For years of doctors screaming, irreversible. And now this quiet woman from Seminole County was making his son's move. Jeremiah follows her to a crumbling duplex in Pottawatomie County. Inside, medical equipment, therapy journals, and a photograph that stops his heart. Her brother, walking, with the same surgical scars as his triplets. The person watching his camera feeds for months? A renegade therapist the medical boards want destroyed. The trusted specialist who told Jeremiah there was no hope? He's been paid $2 million by pharmaceutical companies to bury treatments that actually work. What follows isn't just about paralyzed children. It's about corrupt systems, forbidden hope, and a billionaire who risks everything to expose the truth. Subscribe now, because only those protecting broken systems would want you to look away. Drop a comment. Would you have trusted her or fired her? The footage jolted him awake at 2:47 a.m. Jeremiah Cade leaned closer to the monitor in his Nichols Hills office, pulse hammering against his ribs. On the screen, the new nanny, Lena Miles, 28, quiet as fog, knelt beside his triplets in the therapy room overlooking Lake Hefner. Her lips moved, whispering something the microphone couldn't catch. Then Rowan's toes curled. Not a spasm, not a reflex. Deliberate. Jeremiah's breath locked. His hands slammed the mahogany desk hard enough to rattle the coffee mug beside him. For years, 4 years of verdicts from OU health specialists in Oklahoma City, from surgeons in Stillwater, from neurologists flown in from Norman. All of them said the same cold words: irreversible spinal damage. The boys would never walk. Yet here, on his own surveillance feed, the cameras he'd installed after the last caregiver stole painkillers, and another screamed at Finn until his face went purple, something impossible flickered across the screen. He rewound the footage. Watched it again. Rowan's foot. The curl. The unmistakable intention. Jeremiah built half the skyline of Tulsa. He could negotiate billion-dollar land deals in Seminole County before breakfast. But his own sons, born premature on a storm-drenched stretch of I-40 near Shawnee the night Alora died in the ambulance, remained broken. Untouchable by money or influence or desperate faith. Hope was more dangerous than grief. Hope crushed you twice. On the screen, Lena stood, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. Her voice barely reached the mic, fragile and urgent. I'm running out of time. Running out of time for what? Jeremiah froze the frame. Lena's face angled toward the camera, toward him, though she clearly didn't know it was there. Her expression wasn't guilt. It was fear. Why would she be afraid? His phone buzzed. A camera alert. Someone else had accessed the feed. Another IP address. Not from inside the mansion. Someone outside had been watching his children for months. If you believe children deserve voices when no one's listening, hit subscribe. The night the triplets were born, Jeremiah lost everything that mattered. I-40 near Shawnee. Rain hammering the windshield so hard, he couldn't see the lane markers. Alora's contractions came too fast. Too early, 26 weeks, her screams cutting through the thunder as he pressed the accelerator harder, hydroplaning through water that pooled like black glass. He never made it to the hospital. The ambulance found them pulled over on the shoulder, Alora barely conscious, blood soaking through her dress. The paramedics worked fast, but not fast enough. She died before they reached St. Anthony in Shawnee, her hand going limp in his as the boys were rushed into emergency surgery. Finn, Carter, Rowan. 3 fragile lives yanked into the world too soon. Premature lungs. Underdeveloped spines. Nerve damage so severe the doctors in Stillwater wouldn't even attempt corrective surgery. They told him to prepare for a lifetime of wheelchairs, feeding tubes, and round-the-clock care. Jeremiah buried his wife in Tulsa on a Tuesday. By Friday, he was interviewing caregivers. The first one lasted 3 weeks before he caught her pocketing oxycodone from the boys' medication cabinet. The second screamed at Carter during a feeding session, her voice so shrill Jeremiah heard it from 2 floors away. The third fell asleep while alarms blared, leaving Finn choking on his own spit. After the 8th caregiver failed, Jeremiah stopped trusting anyone. He installed cameras. Every hallway, every corner, every room except their bedrooms. Because even paranoia had limits. The mansion on Lake Hefner became a fortress of surveillance. Motion sensors, audio feeds, digital logs tracking every entrance, every movement, every second of the day. Jeremiah wasn't cruel. He was desperate. The boys deserved better than the world had given them. Better than a mother stolen by a storm. Better than a father who could buy anything except the one thing they needed. He sat in his Nichols Hills office, reviewing footage from the past 72 hours, searching for patterns, for signs, for anything that might explain why this new nanny, Lena, was different. And then he saw it. Lena locking the therapy room door at 1:14 a.m. Why would she lock the door? Lena Miles wasn't supposed to be there at all. The agency in Oklahoma City almost didn't send her. No fancy credentials. No pediatric nursing degree. Just a woman who'd spent her 20s bouncing between relatives' homes in Ardmore, caring for cousins nobody else wanted to deal with. Her resume was 3 pages of babysitting gigs and a single reference from a church volunteer coordinator in Pottawatomie County. Jeremiah had rejected 12 candidates before her. Too bubbly, too detached, too eager to impress. But when Lena walked into the therapy room that first afternoon, she didn't flinch at the wheelchairs or the feeding tubes snaking across the boys' laps. She knelt beside Rowan, touched his hand gently, and said, "You 3 deserve better than the world has given you." No pity, no false optimism, just calm, steady truth. Jeremiah hired her on the spot. For the first 2 weeks, she was unremarkable, quiet, methodical. She adjusted braces without complaint, hummed old hymns under her breath while changing bedding, and never asked for anything beyond her agreed salary. But there were small things, strange things. She arrived early every morning, sometimes before dawn, her beat-up sedan rolling up the Lake Hefner driveway while mist still clung to the water. She stayed late, long after her shift ended, sitting beside the boys in the therapy room with a patience Jeremiah had never seen in anyone. And she never, ever used her phone during work hours. Most caregivers couldn't go 15 minutes without scrolling. Lena kept hers locked in her bag, untouched. Jeremiah told himself it didn't matter. She was good with the boys. That was enough. But then came the locked door. He watched the footage again, frame by frame. Lena entering the therapy room at 1:14 a.m. The soft click of the lock engaging. Her kneeling beside Rowan, hands positioned beneath his feet, whispering something the microphone couldn't capture. And then, Rowan's toes curled. Jeremiah's chest tightened. What was she doing to them? And why did it look like it was working? Jeremiah replayed the footage 17 times. Each time, the same impossible moment. Rowan's toes curling with deliberate intention. Not random. Not reflexive. Controlled. He sat in his Nichols Hills office, the glow of the monitor casting shadows across his face. Outside, Tulsa slept. Inside, his world was unraveling. Lena's method was unlike anything he'd seen. She positioned her hands beneath the boy's feet, paralyzed feet that hadn't responded to 4 years of physical therapy, and whispered in rhythms he couldn't decipher. Her fingers pressed specific points along their ankles, calves, the base of their spines. And they responded. Finn's finger twitched during a session 3 nights ago. Carter blinked in sync with her voice yesterday morning. Small movements. Incremental progress. Things the specialists in Norman and Stillwater said were medically impossible. Jeremiah's chest ached with something he'd buried after Alora died. Hope. But hope came with questions. He watched Lena drive away each night, her sedan disappearing toward Ardmore, sometimes taking detours through Pottawatomie County roads he couldn't explain. Where was she going? What was she hiding? The previous caregivers had been easy to predict. Lazy, greedy, cruel. But Lena? She was devoted. Almost obsessively so. That scared him more. He minimized the therapy room footage and opened the network logs. His IT consultant in Tulsa had flagged something disturbing 2 days ago, a second IP address accessing the camera feeds. Someone outside the mansion. Someone who'd been watching for months without authorization. Jeremiah's stomach twisted. Was Lena working with someone? Was this some elaborate scheme? He clicked through the access logs, tracing timestamps, trying to match them with Lena's shifts. Then his phone buzzed. Another camera alert. Motion detected. Therapy room. 2:03 a.m. Lena was there again. Alone with his sons. In the middle of the night. Subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything. Jeremiah hired a cyber forensics team in Tulsa the next morning. They traced the unauthorized IP address to a location outside Shawnee. Someone had been accessing his camera feeds for 4 months, long before Lena ever set foot in the mansion. Could be a hacker, the lead analyst said, tapping his laptop screen. Or someone with inside knowledge. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. Can you identify them? Not yet. They're using VPN relays, bouncing signals through Oklahoma County, Cleveland County, even Seminole County servers. Whoever it is knows what they're doing. He paid them double to keep digging. That night, Jeremiah followed Lena. She left the mansion at 9:47 p.m., her sedan winding through back roads toward Pottawatomie County. He kept his distance, headlights off, tracking her taillights through the darkness. She turned onto a gravel driveway outside a rundown duplex near the county line. The porch sagged. Paint peeled from the siding. A single dim bulb flickered above the door. Jeremiah parked 200 yards back, watching. Lena disappeared inside for 20 minutes. When she emerged, she carried a black duffel bag. Heavy, judging by how she struggled with it. What was in that bag? He waited until she drove away, then approached the duplex. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and something metallic. Medical equipment lined the walls, portable monitors, orthopedic braces, therapy journals stacked in precarious towers. And then he saw the photograph, taped to the wall. A boy, maybe 12 years old, standing upright without assistance. Smiling. Healthy. The boy had surgical scars running down his spine, identical to the ones on Jeremiah's triplets. Jeremiah's breath caught. Beneath the photo, a handwritten note. Grayson Miles. Walking since June 2023. Lena's last name. Her brother. Jeremiah confronted Lena the next morning in the therapy room. She stood frozen, her face draining of color when he held up the photograph of Grayson. Explain this, he said, voice cold. Now. Her hands trembled. Mr. Cade, You've been treating my sons with unapproved methods. Who else knows about this? Who's been watching my cameras? Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. His name is Dr. Callum Brenner. He's a physical therapist. He saved my brother's life. Jeremiah's chest tightened. Where is he? Operating out of a rural clinic near Tecumseh. He developed a nerve stimulation technique, compression therapy combined with targeted muscle memory exercises. It's not approved by any hospital board in Oklahoma County. They won't even review his research. Why not? Because it works. Her voice cracked. And that threatens the specialists who've been telling families like yours there's no hope. Grayson was paralyzed at 9. For surgeons in Norman said he'd never walk. Dr. Brenner had him standing in 11 months. Jeremiah felt the ground shift beneath him. The person watching your feeds, Lena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. That's him. He monitors cases remotely because if the medical boards find out what he's doing, they'll shut him down. He could lose everything. And you brought him into my home without my knowledge. I brought your sons hope. Lena's voice hardened. Something every doctor you've paid has failed to give them. Silence hung between them. Jeremiah's phone buzzed. A text from the forensics team. IP traced to Tecumseh. Medical facility. Name, Brenner. The renegade therapist wasn't hiding anymore. And neither was the truth. Jeremiah drove to Tecumseh alone. The clinic sat at the edge of town, a converted grain warehouse with peeling white paint and a gravel parking lot. No sign. No official markings. Just a rusted mailbox with the number 447 hand-painted on the side. Inside, the smell of liniment and rubber mats filled the air. A young woman with leg braces practiced walking between parallel bars. An elderly man worked a resistance band, sweat dripping from his temple. In the corner, a teenager, maybe 16, stood from a wheelchair and took 3 shaky steps before collapsing into the arms of a waiting therapist. Dr. Callum Brenner stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, watching with the intensity of a man who'd staked everything on being right. He looked up when Jeremiah entered. No surprise, no fear, just quiet resignation. Mr. Cade, Brenner said, setting down the clipboard. I've been expecting you. You've been watching my children without permission. I've been documenting their progress. Brenner's voice was steady, controlled. Lena asked for my guidance. I provided it remotely because showing up in person would have gotten us both arrested. You're operating without approval from any medical board in Oklahoma. Because the boards won't listen. Brenner gestured toward the young woman on the bars. Her name is Tessa. Doctors in Oklahoma City told her family she'd never stand again after a car accident on Highway 177. That was 2 years ago. Now look at her. Jeremiah watched Tessa take another step, her face tight with concentration and something else, hope. The boards don't want to be wrong, Brenner continued. They've built entire careers on telling families there's no cure. If my methods work, they lose credibility. They lose funding. They lose control. So you hide. I survive. Brenner's jaw tightened. And I help people your specialists have given up on. Jeremiah's chest ached. He thought of the specialists at OU Health, the surgeons in Norman, the neurologists in Stillwater, all of them speaking with such certainty, such finality. But what if they were wrong? The medical board subpoenaed my records last week, Brenner said quietly. Someone reported me. If they shut me down, everyone here loses their chance, including your sons. Who reported you? Brenner hesitated, then pulled a folded letter from his pocket and handed it over. Jeremiah unfolded it. The letterhead bore the logo of a prominent pediatric hospital in Oklahoma County. The signature at the bottom made his blood run cold. Dr. Marcus Valen, the same specialist who'd sat in Jeremiah's Nichols Hills office 3 years ago, hands folded, voice gentle, and told him there was no hope for the triplets. The same man Jeremiah had paid tens of thousands of dollars for consultations that led nowhere. Valen fabricated malpractice complaints, Brenner said. He's scared my research will expose how many families he's failed. If I gain traction, his career collapses. Jeremiah's hands shook as he stared at the letter. A knock on the clinic door interrupted them. Lena stepped inside, her face pale, holding an envelope. This came for me at the mansion. She handed it to Jeremiah. Inside, a court summons. Lena was being called to testify about unauthorized medical treatment. If she admitted to what she'd done, she'd face criminal charges. If she lied, the boys would lose their only chance. And tucked behind the summons, a flash drive. Jeremiah turned it over in his palm. A handwritten note clung to it. Watch this before you decide. He looked at Brenner, then at Lena. What's on it? Lena's voice cracked. Rowan. Standing. Alone. Jeremiah slid the flash drive into his laptop back at the mansion. The video loaded. Shaky footage. Someone's phone camera. The timestamp read 3 days ago, 2:18 a.m. The therapy room. Lena kneeling beside Rowan. And then, Rowan's legs shifted. Slowly. Deliberately. His feet pressed against the floor. His knees straightened. Lena's hands hovered near his hips, guiding but not lifting. And Rowan stood. For one full second, unsupported, his face twisted with effort and something Jeremiah hadn't seen in 4 years, determination. Then his legs buckled. Lena caught him before he hit the floor, whispering, You did it. You did it, Rowan. Jeremiah's throat closed. His hands trembled on the desk. His son had stood. The doctors were wrong. All of them. Every specialist who'd looked at scans and shaken their heads. Every neurologist who'd used words like irreversible and permanent. Every surgeon who'd suggested Jeremiah focus on quality of life instead of recovery. They were all wrong. And Dr. Marcus Valen knew it. Jeremiah replayed the video twice more before picking up his phone. He called his attorney in Tulsa, a man who'd helped him navigate land acquisitions and corporate disputes for 15 years. I need everything you can find on Dr. Marcus Valen, Jeremiah said, his voice cold. Financial records, board complaints, malpractice suits, everything. The attorney called back 6 hours later. You're not going to like this, he said. Valen's been receiving consulting fees from 3 pharmaceutical companies that manufacture spinal injury medications. If Brenner's methods gain approval, those companies lose billions. Valen's been paid over $2 million in the last 4 years to serve as an expert witness in cases dismissing alternative treatments. Jeremiah's stomach turned. It gets worse, the attorney continued. Valen filed the complaint against Brenner anonymously through a third-party medical ethics board in Cleveland County. He's been systematically targeting any therapist who threatens the standard treatment model. The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was financial. Valen had built a career, an empire, on telling desperate families there was no hope. And when someone proved him wrong, he destroyed them. Jeremiah hung up and stared at the freeze frame on his screen. Rowan standing, face fierce with effort, defying every diagnosis Valen had ever given. A knock on his office door. Lena stepped inside, her face drawn and exhausted. "The hearing is tomorrow," she said quietly. "If I testify, they'll ask me to name Dr. Brenner. If I refuse, they'll charge me with obstruction. And if you name him, he loses everything. The clinic, his license, everyone he's helping right now gone." Jeremiah stood, walking to the window overlooking Lake Hefner. The water stretched dark and still under the afternoon sky. "What would you do?" Lena asked, her voice breaking. "If it were your brother?" He turned to face her. "I'd fight, even if you lost. Especially then." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Jeremiah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "If you care about your sons, you'll drop this. Valen has friends in Oklahoma County. You don't want this fight." He stared at the message, jaw tight. Then he forwarded the video of Rowan standing to every major news outlet in Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Norman, Stillwater. He attached a single sentence. "Dr. Marcus Valen said my son would never walk. Watch this and decide who's lying." Within an hour, his phone exploded with calls. "Subscribe now, because this fight is just beginning." The truth was out, and there was no going back. The hearing room in Oklahoma County overflowed with spectators. News crews lined the back wall. Reporters from Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Norman jammed the aisles. The video Jeremiah released had gone viral overnight. 2 million views and climbing. Parents of children with spinal injuries, physical therapists, medical students. They all came to witness what happened next. Dr. Marcus Valen sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. His face remained calm, practiced, but his fingers drummed against the wood. A tell Jeremiah recognized from years of negotiating with men who knew they were cornered. Lena sat across the room, pale and exhausted, her hands folded in her lap. Dr. Callum Brenner sat beside her, shoulders squared, eyes forward. The judge entered. Everyone stood. "This hearing," the judge began, her voice cutting through the tension, "will determine whether unlicensed therapeutic practices were administered to minors without parental consent, and whether Dr. Brenner's methods constitute medical malpractice under Oklahoma law." Valen's attorney stood first. Tall, polished, expensive suit. "Your Honor, Dr. Valen has served families in Oklahoma for 23 years. His credentials are impeccable. He has consistently followed evidence-based medicine approved by every major medical board in this state. What we have here is a dangerous precedent. Untested, unapproved methods being performed on vulnerable children by individuals with no accountability." The attorney gestured toward Brenner. "Dr. Brenner operates without oversight, without peer review, without the safeguards that protect patients from harm. The fact that one child showed temporary improvement does not justify reckless experimentation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge raised her hand for silence, then turned to Lena. "Ms. Miles, did you administer therapeutic treatment to the Cade triplets without Mr. Cade's explicit consent?" Lena stood slowly. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Yes, Your Honor." "And were you aware these methods were not approved by any medical board in Oklahoma?" "Yes." Valen's attorney smiled slightly. The trap was closing. But then Jeremiah stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak." The judge's eyebrow lifted. "Mr. Cade, this is not. I'm the father. I have the right to speak about my children's care." The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed." Jeremiah stepped forward, every eye in the room following him. He'd built skyscrapers, negotiated billion-dollar contracts. But standing here, facing the man who'd told him his sons would never walk, felt heavier than anything he'd ever done. "Dr. Valen sat in my office 3 years ago," Jeremiah began, his voice controlled but hard, "and told me there was no hope for my sons. He used words like irreversible and permanent. He recommended I accept their condition and focus on comfort care." He turned to face Valen directly. "You didn't tell me you were being paid by pharmaceutical companies to dismiss alternative treatments. You didn't tell me your career depends on families like mine staying hopeless." Valen's face darkened. His attorney stood. "Objection. Mr. Cade is making unfounded accusations." "Unfounded?" Jeremiah's voice rose. "I have financial records showing you received over $2 million from 3 pharmaceutical companies in the last 4 years. Companies that manufacture medications my sons were prescribed. Medications that did nothing." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. "Mr. Cade," the judge warned, "you're out of order." Then let me show you order. Jeremiah pulled out his phone and gestured to the bailiff. Play the video on the courtroom screen. The bailiff hesitated, looking to the judge. She nodded. The screen flickered to life. The therapy room. Rowan struggling. Lena guiding. And then, Rowan standing. 1 second. 2. 3. Gasps filled the room. Jeremiah's voice cut through the noise. That's my son. Standing. Because someone believed he could when every doctor you approved said he couldn't. He turned to the judge. If caring about children more than protecting careers is a crime, then charge me too. Silence. Valen's attorney sat down slowly, his confidence draining. The judge leaned forward. Dr. Brenner, I want to see your clinic. Tomorrow. With independent medical observers. Brenner stood. Yes, Your Honor. The gavel struck. This hearing is adjourned pending further investigation. As the crowd erupted, Jeremiah caught Lena's eye across the room. She was crying, but she was smiling. 3 months later, everything changed. The independent medical review cleared Dr. Brenner's methods for supervised clinical trials across Oklahoma. His clinic in Tecumseh became the first state-approved facility for experimental nerve stimulation therapy. Within weeks, families from Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Stillwater, and Norman began filling his waiting room. Dr. Marcus Valen resigned from every medical board he served on. The pharmaceutical companies severed their consulting contracts. His license remained intact, but his reputation shattered beyond repair. Lena was cleared of all charges. And the triplets? Jeremiah stood in the garden overlooking Lake Hefner, watching something he'd been told he'd never see. Finn took 3 unsteady steps across the grass, his leg braces clicking softly with each movement. Carter followed, gripping a walker, his face tight with concentration. And Rowan walked 5 full steps before stumbling into Jeremiah's waiting arms. I did it, Dad, Rowan whispered, his voice shaking. I walked. Jeremiah's throat closed. He pulled all 3 boys close, their small bodies pressed against his chest, and for the first time since Alora died, he felt whole. You did more than walk, Jeremiah said quietly. You proved everyone wrong. If you believe people deserve real chances, hit subscribe. Only those who profit from hopelessness would disagree. Behind them, Lena stood near the patio, watching with quiet pride. She'd been offered positions at 3 major hospitals in Oklahoma County after the trial. She turned them all down. I belong here, she told Jeremiah simply. With them, Jeremiah had doubled her salary and added her name to the boys' trust fund. She'd refused at first, but he insisted. You gave them their lives back. Let me give you security. She'd finally accepted, tears in her eyes. Now, weeks later, Jeremiah stood at the opening ceremony of the Aloracade Rehabilitation Network, a chain of community rehab centers funded entirely by his fortune. The first clinic opened in Pottawatomie County, the second in Seminole County. More were planned across Ardmore, Shawnee, and Cleveland County. Dr. Brenner stood beside him on the platform, addressing a crowd of over 300 families. For too long, Brenner said, his voice steady. We've been told that certain injuries are permanent. That hope is irresponsible. That accepting limitation is the only realistic path forward. He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd. But hope isn't irresponsible. Giving up without trying, that's what's irresponsible. Applause erupted. Jeremiah took the microphone next. He looked out at the faces, parents holding children in wheelchairs, teenagers with braces, elderly patients leaning on walkers. All of them waiting. All of them hoping. 3 years ago, Jeremiah began, I was told my sons would never walk. I believed it because the experts said it with such certainty. But I learned something. Certainty isn't the same as truth. He gestured toward Finn, Carter, and Rowan, who sat in the front row beside Lena. My sons are walking today because one woman refused to accept what everyone else called inevitable. Because one therapist refused to stop trying when every system told him to quit. His voice grew stronger. This network exists so no family has to fight alone. So no child is written off before they've had a real chance. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Jeremiah's place? Would you have trusted Lena or fired her? The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below Lake Hefner, Jeremiah sat with Lena on the mansion's back patio. The boys played nearby, Rowan chasing a ball, Finn laughing, Carter taking careful steps across the lawn. Thank you, Jeremiah said quietly, for not giving up on them. Lena smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. They were never broken, Mr. Cade. They just needed someone who believed they weren't. Jeremiah nodded, watching his sons, his walking, laughing, living sons, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Inside the house, on Lena's phone, a new message appeared from Dr. Brenner. 2 more families approved for the trial. This is only the beginning. And it was.